Um, we're now starting the recording. The reason we record the meetings is we have over 1,500 members in our chapter. And we want everybody to have access, especially to our interview that we do. You're in luck this evening because you have arrived in the evening when we have a wonderful guest. Her name is Robyn Eason, and she is in charge of advocacy for United States Green Building Council's Los Angeles chapter. And she's going to be a really interesting person who's going to talk about a whole bunch of issues that you'll be interested in hearing about. But if for whatever reason you want to share this with somebody else who isn't here, or our other members who are unable to attend tonight, we are now posting these interviews on YouTube so that people can see them. Keep in mind, this is not a reason to avoid coming to the chapter meeting. We need you here. We need your feedback. We need your participation. But for those people who can't make it, that's still a good opportunity to hear that wonderful interview and to hear our previous interviews. They're now available on our website in a link there so that you can see the interviews, the 3 interviews so far that we've done. Continuing. Let's do some very quick committee reports. So these are just basically like, here's our next meeting. Here's what's going on very, very quickly, 1 or 2 minutes. I really appreciate the committee chairs being here, telling you very briefly what's going on with them before we head into our interview. So we will start with the Community Engagement Committee. So do we have Cecile or David here? It looks like we have both of you.
Yes, hi everyone. I will start. I'm Cecile. I work with David Merritt on the Community Engagement Committee. And what we do is we welcome our new members or ancient members who are coming back. And we tell them about what the other committees do to kind of send them to the places that are more interesting for them. So we meet once a month online and once a month in person, and we choose many different areas in Los Angeles because it's such a big area and we want everyone to join. So we won't have any meeting before August or September, but please come join us and have a drink with us. It's a very informal meeting that we do. Thank you. I leave it to David for the other part of it.
Yeah, so I do a lot of the liaison work, and what I try to do is see what the other groups in LA, the greater LA area, are doing, particularly in-person events. And luckily, we now have a very good website and calendar. And our policy is if an event does not conflict with ours and it's a legitimate climate, environmental, conservation group, and hopefully soon more environmental justice groups, we put it on our calendar. So there didn't seem to be another calendar like this in LA. So our calendar now is an important place to go. We are having a protest on July 2nd, Sunday, July 2nd, on the beach in Long Beach, right on the sand. And you can find it in our calendar.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Cecile. Appreciate that. We're now going to go to Andrew Ellis, who is in charge of Legislative and Policy Committee and is also running our speaker training and our climate business stuff, though he could use some help if anybody's up for it. So, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Charles. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. Let me just update everybody about the Legislative Committee's work in the last 6 months. We've been working with San Fernando Valley, and they put together a screen. Michael, if you could let me share my screen, I would like to bring up a spreadsheet. I think I can do that. This is the current status of our bills. A lot of our bills that we pegged as a priority for in January, February, March timetable survived the appropriations and been sent off to the next to the other house. And a lot of them, some of them have passed. The ones that didn't pass, I'll just go down here and just let you know. The California Global Warming Solutions Act, Senator Stern's bill, SB 12 did not pass. EV charging infrastructures 507 did not pass. Oil wells, health protection zones 556 didn't also pass. So let me just stop the share here and tell you that the both the teams, the legislative teams for San Fernando and for the Los Angeles chapter are tracking all of these. If you want to participate with us, we write support letters and we contact legislators on various matters of importance to the LA chapter and again to the San Fernando chapter. So please join us. I'll put my contact information into the chat so everybody can. We just had a speaker training legislative workshop yesterday morning, Saturday morning. We always meet on the last Saturday of the month at 9:30 a.m. Please join us if you want to, and I'll put my contact information again in the chat so everybody can talk. Thanks so much, Charles.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Climate curricula. Do we have Lucy? I believe I saw her.
Yes,
Yeah,
we do.
Lucy's here.
Yes, you do. Hold on, let me start my video. Oops, wrong thing. Oh, for go away. There you go. Sometimes computers do things that I don't mean for them to do. Our next committee meeting will be, I was just trying to figure out what 4 weeks from the 17th is, from this last 17th. So I'm not sure. Let me look. It'll be the 1, 2, 3, 4, July 8th. And lots of things have been happening. We found out that people might know that we ended up having a success in bringing in the climate literacy committee. We ended up, the climate literacy resolution. We ended up with, supposedly we got the end of the year report, 210 schools had climate literacy champions, and of those 75 got paid, which is a really bad thing. So we're working on trying to get all the different coordinators of different subjects and letters to all the coordinators of different subjects. If you're interested to help out, please, I'll drop our email in the chat and help us out. We're going to be writing letters this month, and then we're going to be and doing some listening, and we want to have a listening session with all the climate literacy champions and with a whole number of students. We have a student who's working on calling all the youth councils in the state. Okay, so
Thank you, Lucy. Appreciate that very much. Appreciate all the work you guys do. That's an area where we've been really successful and done a lot of things over a lot of time, and Lucy's been at the center of all that. So thank you very much. And this is also a good opportunity to point out to all of you that if you're new to the organization, a lot of our work is done at the committee level, and no one's expected to be on all the committees because there's too many issues that affect our climate that for us to try to do it all by ourselves or to be involved in everything. But you have a great opportunity to pick a lane with all these diverse efforts that we're making, and to have a meaningful impact on a particular issue. So with that, I will now move to our food committee, and I think I saw Jen was here. So I know she's actually been out on maternity leave, and I appreciate you making an effort to be here for us tonight. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Charles. Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Ho, co-chair of the Food Ag Committee. Our overall goal is to advocate for sustainable and regenerative food systems in LA and beyond. And so if you're interested in joining our committee, I'll drop my email address in the chat. We meet at the last Thursdays of every month. So our next meeting is this Thursday, the 29th from 7 to 8 p.m. Right now, we are working on a couple of working to review a couple of the key proposals to support Regenerate America, which we are an official member of. And so I'm happy to share more about kind of these 3 key proposals to anyone who's interested. And I can also share that in the chat today. I just don't want to take up too much time. So.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you, Jen. I know these are kind of like drive-by, reports that we get from the committee chairs, because they could fill up a meeting just talking about the work that they're doing. And
pick a fight with a big dog bigger than you.
Sorry, I missed the last part.
I just said thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Yes, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Charles.
All right, we'll head now to the Water Committee. Our co-chair, Andy Hatala, who is the chair of the Water Committee, was unable to make it tonight. He has family who are in town. And so he sent me his report. And the report basically is that the surviving water bills that have moved into the second legislative chamber are something that the committee and along with the California Coalition on Water are submitting advocacy letters to either support or oppose, depending on what our point of view is. And we may have in the next month or so opportunities for you to weigh in as a member with advocacy. And if so, we might send out an email regarding that. Andy also provided a link to a water-related video that he would like you to see. It is now in the chat. And also, as something that's kind of been Andy's project he's championed, though it's a larger function of our chapter, it's also something that the Water Committee focuses on a lot, which is getting involved in the monthly volunteer day at the Curavungna Springs, which is in West LA. It's right next to University High. And it's a sacred, a traditional site of the Tongva and the Gabrielino tribes in the area. It's a really cool place. And Bob Ramirez, this dude who's running in these days, is very into supporting biodiversity and plants and species and all this stuff. And it's a really cool thing to get involved. And you can go and get a tour as well as doing some volunteer time if you're interested in that. So that is now in the chat. Biodiversity. I am chair of the Biodiversity Committee, and we are heavily involved in several things. I want to tell you, first of all, that our next meeting is going to be, it's not posted yet on the website, but it eventually will be posted. It's going to be on Sunday, July 23rd at 6 p.m. So that's back to our regular time. We've done the last couple at an earlier time because we had to combine them on the same day as this meeting. But 6 p.m. on the 23rd of July, Sunday, will be our next meeting. We remain heavily engaged with an effort to try to oppose basically plastic grass, artificial turf that the Las Virgenes Unified School District is planning on putting on all of their schools, or 6 of them. And that's something we've been heavily engaged on that we'd love to have your involvement in. Also today, we talked in our meeting about our effort to be involved in the Wildlife Corridors initiative. So for those of you who may not know, in 2014 began an effort at city council level to pass an ordinance that would provide for corridors for wildlife to pass between houses. As part of when you develop, you have to leave space for the wildlife. And that has been 9 years in the making because it's had tons and tons of opposition along the way. It's had many revisions along the way. Paula Peterson, who is here, and I went down on Tuesday to provide testimony to the Public Works Committee on behalf of Climate Reality. And the motion passed Public Works unanimously. It is now going to go forward with the entire city council. Something's been a lot of work on our committee has been involved in recent times in advocating for that. Also, we're still involved in our effort to create a pilot project for new city trees. That's all what's going on. Come to the next Biodiversity Committee meeting if you are so inclined. Is anybody here from the faith-based committee? Is William here, or anybody who was designated to give a report? All right, we're doing pretty well. We had most of them. And I know we have the marketing committee people here. Michael, why don't you give us a report from marketing committee?
Sure. Yeah, so marketing committee, it's myself and Ash Dawson, who's here as well. Our next meeting is going to be on Wednesday, July 12th at 8 p.m. We are in charge of keeping the website updated, sending out the newsletter, updating the social media for the chapter. Couple of things I wanted to alert people to that you may have seen in a recent newsletter. We are doing a survey right now to figure out what the best time for the monthly meeting is. So I'm going to put that link in the chat. If you could just fill it out. It has like 3 questions. And we are starting an action alert email address or email list. So typically we try to send out 2 newsletters a month. One is kind of the main newsletter that gives all the updates for the month. The other one is more focused on the chapter meeting and the biggest events that the chapter is having as a reminder, kind of mid-month. But for people who are interested in potentially getting additional emails when there's something important to do, that's the action alert email list. So it's new. We haven't actually sent one of those emails out yet, but we're just getting people to sign up for it. So I'll put that link in the chat as well.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Ash, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, hello, I'm Ashley. Michael's basically been taking this lead on everything marketing, but I did want to say if anyone needs graphics for any events that they are having for Climate Reality, please email me. I'll put my email in the chat and I'll get it done as quick as I can. And then any reminders of events that you want me to post, let me know and I can put them on Instagram. So I've been trying to handle that. And any reminders is easier for me. If you have a particular event that you need highlighted, let me know and I'll make a graphic for it. And we just got the right sizing for the website and everything like that. So let me know.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Marketing has really just been a cut above this year. They've just really rocked it and they've really given us a really solid, dependable website. And if you ever have an announcement that you feel is climate related and doesn't conflict with one of our events or an event that you want us to be involved in, marketing people are generally ready to do that and help you to get that out to our people. So this brings us to the interview portion of our meeting, and you are in for a treat. We have an absolutely wonderful guest this evening. I want to welcome Robyn Eason here. Hi, Robyn. I want to wave to everybody so we can see you. And thank you very much for coming and being part of our meeting tonight. Can we switch to just the two of us view, Michael? Do you know how to do that? Or no?
I know we can go to.
Who knows? If you don't have it on speaker view, try to switch it. Try to switch your Zoom call to speaker view for the interview portion of this. Unless you just prefer to keep it with the whole crowd and just have the little tiny windows, it's whatever makes it work for you guys. So anyway, Robyn, thank you very much for coming. We appreciate you being here. Robyn is in charge. Let's see, what's your official title? The Senior Advisor for Policy and Advocacy for the United States Green Building Council. That's the USGBC, the Los Angeles chapter. Those are the lead people that you see buildings get like LEED Platinum, LEED Gold, those kind of things. And Robyn heads up that for them and has been involved in just a number of things in terms of being an advocate for climate, for sustainability, and for really a bunch of stuff that needs to happen in our world. And we're really fortunate to be here, to have her here this evening. So welcome, Robyn.
Thank you, Charles. Hi, everyone. Good to see your faces and really inspiring to hear all of the great work all the committees are doing. I'm not sure why I haven't been linked with this group prior to now, but I certainly already have signed up for the newsletter. So looking forward to being more plugged in henceforth.
I'm sorry, go ahead. We're kind of like the way too friendly neighbors. Once you make friends with us, you're not going to get rid of us. So you're definitely part of us now, and I appreciate you doing this. You know, the reason I asked you to come and be part of this series, Robyn, is because we've had some really great people so far, and I have had the pleasure of interacting with you a little bit through USGBC LA, and you know, Robyn is one of these people who is just despite difficult challenges and difficult odds, she always has a great attitude and makes everybody around her feel like the difficult is possible and makes everybody feel good about their advocacy. And that's something that's a lesson for all of us, and just really made a strong impression on me. And I wanted to bring that energy to you guys. So could we start off a little bit, Robyn, by maybe you telling us a little bit about your journey, your path to getting involved in sustainability issues, and how you kind of ended up where you are?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. So I'm 43, and that's an important number because my generation came about professionally at a time where environmental sustainability wasn't really a thing. It wasn't really talked about. You couldn't go to school for it. You know, I think it was just kind of an emergent idea. And so I actually started my career in economic development. I had a background educationally in urban planning, architecture, and civil engineering. I originally thought I was going to design roadway bridges as sculptures, and then quickly realized I liked more of the sort of contextual storytelling that urban planning had to offer in terms of just the interdependence of systems. So went the economic development route and started working in urban neighborhoods for about 4 years, learning the ropes of understanding why some neighborhoods are thriving while others might be struggling to attract, job generators and affordable housing and things of that nature. So did that type of work for about 4 years and had the pleasure of doing that interdisciplinary with architects and engineers. And some of the architects had lead AP, lead accredited professional behind their names, and that was very intriguing. This is circa 2008. And I was in Washington, D.C. at the time, which is the headquarters of where the U.S. Green Building Council National resides. And so I think it was a little bit of where kind of luck meets opportunity. I was sort of really drawn to this new concept at the time called green building, and happened to put my hat in the ring for a few job opportunities at the headquarters in DC. And at the time, they were actually about to launch their green communities rating system known as Lead for Neighborhood Development, and needed someone with an urban planning background to help lead that program or co-lead that program. And so one thing led to another, ended up joining the USGBC National. And that was great for me because then it meant that I didn't have to go back to school for sustainability. I could just learn about what green building and green communities were as USGBC defined it on the job. And I could use my architecture and civil engineering background to kind of help with some of the building-wide suite of standards. So that was my foray into sustainability circa 2009. I was with USGBC for about 7 years, really at the time where LEED was exploding in all the various ways. The marketplace was really excited about what it meant for them to design environmentally responsible buildings and henceforth communities. And it was a really kind of rocking, great time. Found myself moving to California in 2014, mainly because I was just drawn to how progressive the state has been, sort of out of necessity, given all the smog and air pollution that was going on in the 80s and 90s, and was just really intrigued by being in an environment that had legislation that was pioneering in climate change in so many ways. And so eventually found myself applying for jobs in the public sector and ended up landing a position at the city of West Hollywood, California. They needed someone to lead up their sustainability activities and build a sustainability portfolio in various ways that I can get into. So ended up joining that city and doing some really great work for them in all lines of sustainability and equity and the intersection of justice and all of those things. I was there for about 6 years. It was a kind of fantastic learning environment and collegiate environment to do really good sustainability work, not unlike what y'all are doing here at Climate Reality. But after 6 years of that and being sort of the only person in that position leading those efforts, really just got burnt out and decided to take some time off from traditional employment last April. So I had some fun reconnecting with folks I hadn't seen since the pandemic, and now find myself up in the Central Coast, working remotely for USGBC LA and doing some other work in sustainable winemaking up here. So that's my brief story in a nutshell, but happy to go through any specifics as it makes sense.
That's awesome. And I'm going to ask you about the wine because that's fun, but we'll save that for a little bit later. One of the things that strikes me as valuable about where you are in your path is that you come from that urban planning perspective, which urban planning is all about thinking about systems. And I think that is so important to environmental work, so important to climate work, is that we don't just think about solving solar or solving energy with solar. We don't just think about solving pollution with eliminating plastic on the beach. There's so many other things. Everything's connected to one another. We have to think about product life. We have to think about how one little act here affects 4 or 5 other sectors, and biodiversity and species extinction is all connected to 100 different things that are happening. And I think it's really important for us to environmentalists to always come at things from a systems point of view whenever possible. And so having, your background in there has got to inform, a lot of what you do, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very astute way of putting it, Charles. I think I was fortunate to pivot from architecture and engineering into urban planning because urban planning itself, regardless of sustainability, is a broad area of practice and expertise. And so I had to start thinking interdependently and even generationally. So I would say breadth and depth early on in school. And that really kind of prepared me then to eventually pivot into the sustainability profession because everything goes together. And it actually, to me, it's what makes things certainly challenging, but also fun, right? You're thinking about EV charging and green affordable housing and solar and battery storage and, how all of these sort of larger systems goes into an actual building or transportation electrification, but then how that then narrows down and affects the actual person living in an apartment or in a home, and how that then translates into how they live their daily lives. And so it's great because it touches us all, whether or not you have expertise in this industry or not. There's something that all of us can do within it. And I think having those kind of messages branded, throughout society is what hopefully will allow us to begin to work more in line with nature versus the other way around in years to come.
So I'm struck by something else you said where you talked about your kind of path and your experience with USGBC when really they were just getting the ball rolling. I mean, I don't think a lot of people maybe have a perspective. They see like a building's a LEED platinum or something, or LEED gold or something, and they see a plaque on the side of the building, and it's easy to assume that these standards have been around for centuries or something, that this is something that's a long established thing. But having done some LEED training myself, it was surprising to me. This is a new frontier. This is really brand new stuff that's just been evolving in the last decade or so. And all of this work in trying to figure out how to take this built environment and decarbonize it and make it cleaner and make it sustainable for a long-term future is new thinking. And you're in at the ground level of building an entire new approach to the way buildings and humans interfacing with them happen. Can you talk a little bit about that, the challenges you face, and particularly building decarbonization? I know is a topic that a lot of our members are interested in, talking about the challenges and how we get to where we need to go.
Yeah, building decarbonization is certainly a complicated target, or just a topic in and of itself. I would say that you're right in that the U.S. Green Building Council actually just celebrated 30 years of existence. And when I was there, it was definitely still, let's say, in toddlerhood. And everybody was just really excited about what this could mean for the marketplace moving forward. And I think one of the things that USGBC did really well was distill the concepts of green building down into a few credit categories and then a few credits, and they use that nutritional card as the symbol for like, this is the recipe for how you do green building according to the things that we've pulled in the marketplace is the important components of a green building. And so it was a digestible way to educate, industry experts, the public, what have you, and what were some of the major components of green building. And then it just kind of exploded from there. You have cities adopting LEED as part of their policies. In fact, Cal Green was largely based off of LEED. It's now in some ways its own thing for California, which is just great to see. And now 30 years later, you have this maturity in a lot of these different concepts. But if it wasn't for the U.S. Green Building Council kind of setting the stage and doing it in such an elegant way, we wouldn't be as far along as we are now, that's for sure. And so, in thinking about that, I think it's important then to bring that back to building decarbonization. And I think that's going to be our gnarly challenge, biggest nut to crack, if you will, moving forward, is like, what are some of those levers of change that cities, that property owners, that contractors and vendors, policymakers, what have you, need to think about in order to make this happen. You know, we need to think about the just transition, a workforce that can really be trained in electrification and renewable energies and the interconnection of these systems, smart building technologies, in order then to be able to even install some of these things. You know, we're looking at it from a new construction perspective, and we're looking at it from an existing building perspective. We have to also think about equity, right? And the energy cost burdens that so many of low wealth communities and communities of color face just to pay their utilities and electric bills, right? So how is each community thinking through the application of building decarbonization policies within their cities in order to not overburden those that are already burdened with a number of, you know, life issues. And so it's moving in the right direction. We have a number of different jurisdictions that have adopted either building electrification codes, natural gas bans, a number of these different policies that think about, you know, new appliances and when those mandates need to be required, different energy efficiency methodologies, smart technologies, and even occupant education, which is something I don't think is talked about a lot as well. And I think it's just finding those sweet spots along the way of, as these buildings age, when do we pull the trigger for some of these things to come into effect? How do we align ourselves with marketplace efforts, you know, from different federal agencies that are coming into play as well? And then how do we in some ways make a recipe for digestion for these concepts so that folks who are charged with doing the work are able to understand how to do the work?
Yeah, it's a complicated task, and thank you for really offering a nice perspective on that. It's not simply just a matter of just telling each developer, well, you just have to do electric now, kind of thing. There's so many different things. A building is one of the most complicated things that we create as a culture and as humanity, and just hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of parts that go into the construction of most new buildings. And the entire process from the construction to the design to the disposal, the end of life of all that stuff factors into everything we're talking about in terms of sustainability. One of the things that we as an advocacy group depend on is people like you who are kind of in the weeds on that, because the people in this group aren't going to get involved in negotiating ASHRAE standards or anything like that. I mean, that's just most of them don't even know what I'm talking about, kind of thing. So that's not going to be our lane. But one thing that is our lane is challenging false statements and people who challenge sustainability for whatever reason in a political agenda. And we're starting to now enter a phase where I'm noticing more and more a lot of the things that are being done in the building front in the name of sustainability are being challenged on a political front. And I'll give you an example. Something as simple as requiring electrification of appliances going forward, that we use electric stoves and ovens instead of natural gas-based ones. And same with our dryers that we use in our house. There is an element out there who opposes this, and for whatever motivations I won't necessarily characterize, but they tend to say that they're going to support legislation saying we have to keep using natural gas, and we're not going to get on board with this crazy communist, democratic, socialist, liberal conspiracy to put electric appliances in people's houses. Even though these really shouldn't be politicized issues, because they're about health, they're about supporting people. There's no good way that you can say you're better off with a gas appliance being installed in a new building than others. So as somebody who heads up advocacy and encounters these kind of hurdles, what would be your take on that, or your advice to a group of people who are involved in advocacy for dealing with things like this on the building front when we hear stuff like efforts in a number of states to actually challenge something along those appliance issues?
Yeah, this is a great question. Maya Angelou, I think she said something along the lines, it's not a direct quote from her, but people at the end of the day remember how you made them feel, regardless of how many interactions you might have had with them. It's sort of, what do they feel when they're around you? What do they feel with your expression of self and your expression of what it is that you do? And, that's not everybody, but I think at the core of most of society, we want to live in a place where, if we have the fortune enough to have a family, see that next generation thrive. We want to live in a place that's safe, that we have access to basic human rights, housing, energy, water, a number of those things. And a lot of this conversation, I think you're right, Charles, it elevates into sort of propaganda on, who's on what side. And it forgets the sort of humanistic approach to what we're all talking about, right? Climate is about human needs. It's also about non-human needs. But in terms of it relating to those of us who, exist as part of this human species, it's about how we relate to each other at the end of the day. It's about making sure that our communities are taken care of. It's about making sure, your aunts or your daughters or your sons or your fathers or whomever that are okay at the end of the day. And so I think there's an element of having to storytell and personalize what we're doing in a way that really touches folks' hearts, right? I think everybody can relate to having someone in their family that might have suffered from something. And so really getting to the heart of like what that feels like to know of folks that might have either suffered or that you might just want the best for those that you care about. And so I think in the way that we approach advocacy at UHGBC LA, yes, we want to do the advocacy letters. Yes, we want to meet with state senators. Yes, we want to do all of the sort of traditional advocacy methods. Those are important. Talking to people who are in power is important. Also bringing the voices of the community to those in power is important. But at the end of the day, we also want to, I call it democratize advocacy and really personalize it in a way that we're all kind of living storytellers of the world we want to see in society. And so if there's a way that we can find connection as we continue to talk about all of these levers of change, whether it's in buildings or transportation or what have you, related to climate action, I think that's going to be the key that continues to move us forward. And those that don't want to listen, that's fine. But very similar to how USGBC started, you had the pioneers who are already on board. You had the marketplace that was trying to think of like, okay, what is this new green building idea? And then you had what they called the laggards who just, stood in their footsteps and dug their heels into the ground and didn't want to move. But what happened 30 years later, green building is now normalized. And so we got to get to a point where all of this is just normalized. And it takes folks like the folks that are here now in order to do that and do that in community.
Yeah, that's really good advice. You never cease to surprise me with how insightful you seem when I ask you a question like that. So thank you on that. I want to point out that that the Maya Angelou quote was put in the chat by one of our members. So if you want to see the full quote, take a look at it in the chat.
Thank you for that.
So to that end, I want to ask you a question that may be not fair to ask you, but I know you have been involved in efforts to support BIPOC initiatives within representation within sustainability circles and efforts to support climate justice and things along those lines. I think that's something our organization it does have a national level that has funding, but the local chapters basically kind of are on our own. We're just a bunch of people without dues, without a real, without like a huge budget or anything like that. And so we're just kind of a small group of people trying to fight the good fight at a local level. That being said, where I think one of the areas where I think we have not been very successful is being extremely representative of Los Angeles as a whole. And you can see that in this room. Most of us who are here tonight are kind of like me, kind of grayish a little bit of gray, or maybe a little more gray white people. And that's not to say that grayish hair white people are not important and welcome to the cause, and you're all welcome here. And I want you to be here. Let me re-emphasize that. You are important, but it would be nice if we have more people who look like you or look like different from us as part of that conversation. And I don't think we've always been successful in doing that. We have over 1,500 members in our chapter, and we're much more represented in that large 1,500 because those are people who are oftentimes have attended the chapter trainings and things, and National does make an effort to be more proactive in those areas. But I'm curious if you have as somebody who's just kind of new to our group, if you have a perspective on things that maybe we could be doing better to engage with groups that are not as well represented within our numbers.
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I think, I guess one thought I have is, given the sort of vast number of your membership, 1,500 members is a heck of a critical mass. And I can only imagine that they're scattered throughout the LA region. And so one thought I would have is, I think make it known that, you really want to be as inclusive of different groups, to, serve on the committees, to think of either new committees that may not exist, but that maybe need to exist in order to have that that adequate representation, and then go out and talk with folks from the areas that may make sense to have that kind of either racial diversity or diversity of some other type. There's so many community-based organizations in Los Angeles. I was just reading through the website of the Liberty Hill Foundation and the great work that they are doing related to youth environmental justice and a number of different like commission trainings and making sure that there's representation on some of these different governing bodies. And, aligning with foundations like that have those types of missions, aligning with some of the existing community-based organizations, just understanding where they might be coming from with some of their needs. It may be environmental justice, but they might be using different words to describe the things that they're doing. And so really just, I call it, one of the things I've always done when I've moved to a new area is I crudely, in my olden days, called it blitz the market. But what I really meant was do the sort of due diligence of understanding, who's in your market, who's in your neighborhoods, who are your neighbors, who are the people that that you don't know that are doing great work. What are some of the issues that they're facing? Who are the Angelinos that know this place inside and out, that have been dealing with injustices for since they their existence here, and those are the folks that I want to understand their stories, and then how it makes sense, if it makes sense, to align with either those individuals, those community leader groups, or those community-based organizations. And I think the important thing to say here is that it's not like a light switch. It'll take time and it might take years, but that's okay, because that's how genuine relationships are formed. That's how understanding is created. And then that's how power is built. And once you have that kind of critical mass of power and critical mass of people who trust each other to do the work and to be accomplices to the folks that need it. And that's how you kind of shift the mindset and shift the focus and see the results that you want.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much. My next question is really one of an invitation as well as a question. And that would be, since we do have ourselves involved in advocacy and you're involved in advocacy, are there things that our organization can do that can help USGBC-LA and their advocacy? I mean, I know the legislative list of bills that you saw that Andrew was talking about a little earlier, that we work with San Fernando Valley on, and that corresponds quite favorably with the list that USGBC LA was lobbying on behalf of this year. They're not completely the same by any means, but there's a lot of favorable overlap. And so as we look maybe toward next year's effort or the year after that to do that, is there a way that we can help your efforts and by association have you help our efforts in terms of that advocacy and be allies to one another more effectively maybe than we've been able to be previously?
Absolutely. Yeah. In just preparation for being here and looking at your website, I was again blown away by the number of different topical committees that exist under climate reality, and was thinking through all of the committees that exist under USGBC LA. And I was like, wow, there's great synergy already that exists between the two groups. And I think it could be really powerful to maybe sit down with you, Charles, or some of the committee chairs of both organizations and see where it makes sense to come together on a variety of issues. I know for our advocacy efforts, I've just been in this position helping out USGBC LA for about 6 months. And so this has been kind of an experimental year to sort of help us mature in how we want to, what is our advocacy identity? And I think we've made some strides in that related to the bills that we've chosen, but also just making headway with state representatives that we want to be resources for. But I think, like I was saying before with the critical mass, there's always power in numbers, and we do see the value in coalition building. And so I think that there is a great room for collaboration and putting our heads together and seeing what makes sense to have joint efforts, both in advocacy, but I would say also in events, maybe even, getting in front of like local cities and jurisdictions in the Southland as well, related to some of the topic areas that we want to see represented within our local space here. So that was a long way to basically say, yes.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And I'm sure you and I can follow up, but let's make some of that stuff happen if we can. So that's good. All right, before I open it up to the general group for questions, I want to ask you about the wine stuff. What makes wine sustainable? Why should we care about it? And tell me something fun about being involved in that whole process.
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to personalize it a little bit, but as you all know, I've worked a lot in urban areas. And so when I was taking some time off, what I realized was that I really had very little knowledge about what were some of the sustainability or climate conversations happening on working lands or agricultural spaces or what have you. And didn't necessarily think of wine in the beginning, but eventually came around to that. And, the proximity of the Santa Ynez, kind of north of Santa Barbara area, winemakers made it kind of really easy to just do some informational interviews and figure out what some of the things that they were discovering or just knew about that they were dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so from those interactions, I realized that the wine industry has a ton of green certifications, some of them very akin to LEED for green buildings. It's not called LEED, but there's certifications that essentially wineries can pursue in order to be more water efficient, more energy efficient, use of renewable energies, EV charging infrastructure, et cetera. And then there's certifications that vineyards can pursue related to their farming practices. I think your food chair was talking a lot about regenerative agriculture, and that's a big discussion right now in the wine industry related to how they care for the vines, how they nurture them, and how they farm in a way that really supports organic soil health, holistic land management, largely using grazing animals, and figuring out ways that you can design biodiversity versus using pesticides to be able to keep the incidence of injury to the vines at minimum. And so it's been really fascinating to discover the chatter that's been going on. One last thing I'll say about it is that that industry has also been thinking a lot about scope 3 emissions, which we don't think about a lot, consumption-based emissions. And so looking really at like shipping costs and using lightweight glass, and even in the tasting rooms, instead of having solo bottles that they pour for the customers, they now store, some of the wineries now store some of that wine in kegs. And so it still limits the oxygen that can get into wine, so it doesn't spoil, but it limits then the use of glass and other things that contribute to their carbon footprint. So it's been a really fantastic discovery to understand how another sort of industry is trying to do right by the planet. And yeah, there's just a lot to get into in this space as well.
Okay, so I'm putting you on the spot now. What is an example of a wine that checks a lot of those boxes, and that is your favorite wine that you would recommend to everybody in the room?
Ooh, favorite wine is hard, but I would say if you're really interested in this stuff, a winery that's doing really great things around this space is Tablas Creek Winery up in Paso Robles. They have a fantastic vineyard. They've gotten regenerative organic certification, and they're just doing a lot of really interesting, awesome stuff. They actually have a blog that they put out every week that's been fascinating to just follow, and it talks a lot about the things that I've just mentioned, but that would be a winery that I would lift up as doing some really great best practices in this space.
And their best wine for your money?
Ooh, gosh, they have a couple of Italian wines that they produce, and so I would say the Italian varietals. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but any of their Italian varietals would be my suggestion.
Okay, cool. And you handled that quite well. I didn't prepare you for that in our prep interview, so nice job. All right, we're going to open it up to people in the audience. You can raise your hand electronically or just raise it on the screen. We'll see you, and that'll work. And then I'll call you out, and you can ask Robyn your questions. Anybody have any questions for Robyn? Deborah, I saw you kind of raise your hand. Do you have a question? Oh, now you've gotten shy on me. All right. Okay. We'll go with Andrew. Andrew, why don't you tell us what?
Hi, Robyn. I just had a couple of quick questions. USGBC is real focused on the Inflation Reduction Act. We all went through a training at Climate Reality to try to find out how to talk to our audiences about the Inflation Reduction Act. What's your best advice for getting the funds that are being dispersed by the federal government to communities that were impacted by fossil fuel development or transitioning, and also those communities have been marginalized and historically not didn't have access to the financing available? So any comments on the IRA and its impact here? We're doing quite a bit of education on this, and we'd love to know what the USGBC is doing.
Yeah, so a lot of that work is being done by the USGBC National Advocacy Team. And Andrew, if you haven't seen it already, I can either maybe send through Charles a couple of links where they've actually elegantly distilled into a number of different one-pagers by property type, how to interpret the IRA, which I think is super helpful for anybody trying to understand. I'm going to call it the gobbledygook related to that legislation. Obviously it's an historic passage of a much needed bill. I think maybe I'll just speak for myself and would like to say that I wish a lot of it exists as sort of tax credits, right? And there's some kind of one-off programs that go beyond that. But I think sometimes when you kind of you hide policy around tax credits, it tends to get a bit lost, and or it can make folks not as eligible for something just based on how it's constructed. And that's not a criticism of the IRA. It's just one of the challenges of when you structure policy like that. And so, I would love to see either from the Fed or maybe more realistically from the state that trickles down to local government and vice versa, more money that really goes towards actual programs that property owners can wrap their head around, that cities can wrap their head around, so that, you know, the folks that are closer to the people actually doing the work can facilitate, you know, taking advantage of those programs, or at least being able to utilize them in a way that then translates into actual projects on the ground. And so I know the state has some great resources and grants that they've put together in that regard. I'm hoping to see more of that. But yeah, happy to share those one-pagers with you if you think they'll be helpful.
Thank you so much.
Lucy, you're up.
So, Robyn, there was a wonderful, a few years back, must be 10 years back now, I was teaching in Van Nuys High School, and there was a wonderful, I think it was LA, a Green Building Council had a van, a little, like a demonstration van that they would take to schools. And I was wondering if that still exists. And, you know, do you know anything about it? And the other thing that I'm interested in is, are there principles that we should be teaching our students about green building and about how to make where you're living, your neighborhood, you know, like what are some principles that we might, or when might I find them, so that we can incorporate that in what kids are learning about climate?
Yeah, great question, Lucy. So I don't think the van exists anymore. At least it predates me. But we do have a sustainability curricula that was designed for K through 12 schools. I can try to find the link before we get off today. And we actually just brought on, she's been with us for probably about 2 months now, an educational director who's revamping some of the materials associated with some of the programs for those schools to make sure that they are a bit more sustainable. But yeah, there's a K through 12 curricula that we've been stewarding for quite some time, several years now, and we actually have, I think, a waiting list from schools that want to participate and have us come and demonstrate some of those kits with the kids. And so I think it could be a really great rubric for something that you're looking to do, or it could be, to Charles's point, a great way for us to partner, right, between the two organizations. So.
Hey, Michael, you're up.
Hi, Robyn. Good to see you. I was curious, you know, we're from all over Los Angeles, and since you worked in West Hollywood for such a long time, I think it's interesting to see what we can learn from each other, you know? And so was there anything that you guys worked on in West Hollywood while you were there that you think other cities should be doing or could learn from?
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, gosh, and there were so many things on the docket when I arrived at West Hollywood. You know, one of the things we did was, we already had a green building ordinance, a local one on the books from back in the day, and we kind of revamped that program quite a bit. So the existing program, not to make this too long, was pre-Cal Green. And so it was very unique to West Hollywood, which made sense for 2007. But in 2017, when we were updating it, the state building code had been out then for like 7 years. And so one of the things we did with that local code was actually restructure it to complement the state code, because what was happening was that folks that wanted to build in West Hollywood, they had to look at the state code for a set of requirements. Then they had to look at West Hollywood for another set of requirements. And it was just really clunky in terms of folks being able to know how to proceed. And so what we were really keen on was, what is the state has already provided as a minimum green code for us? And then where were the areas where we could go beyond the state? And so EV charging was one area. We did sort of kind of like a reach code for requiring rooftop, either solar or green roofs or what have you, and a few other things we wanted to see that go beyond the state. And so we ended up having a program that kind of stacked on what the state did, which meant that when folks came in for their planning docs to be approved at like the permitting stage, we had all of the requirements for the state and for West Hollywood on like one implementation kind of planning document sheet. And then that would translate into one sort of massive construction doc with all the requirements, both the state and West Hollywood requirements on one sheet. And then for the inspection part, we carved out what the state needed to see done and then what we needed to see done. And so worked a lot with building and safety to figure out how to elegantly do that. But what we wanted was people to have kind of a one-stop shop for each part of the process to build in West Hollywood, but then still build beyond the state code to the requirements that made sense for the property types within our city. And so that is a best practice that I don't see a lot. I think maybe Palo Alto is the only other city that I know of that has done something similar to that. But we were really trying to think through origin to completed building and what was sort of the journey of the folks that had to do the work, and how do we do that in a way that really streamlined it so that at the end of the day they do right by us and we do right by them.
All right, I'm going to wrap that up because I try to keep the trains moving on time here. But Robyn, dude, you rocked it. Very great work. Thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate your time, your insight. Having you as in our network as somebody that we can talk to is just very, very valuable to us. And a heartfelt thanks for you being here, but also for the work you're doing. I mean, because it's important and we greatly appreciate it. So thank you very much. We have about 15 minutes left in our meeting. You're welcome to stay, or you can skedaddle, whatever you want to do. But don't be a stranger. You're welcome here anytime, and we'd like to have you in our midst. So thanks again, and thank you everybody for your comments on that. So a couple of extra things. So as you know, we do a trivia contest at the end of the meeting to see if you're paying attention to the interview. So I see some smiles. I think this is becoming a tradition that people dig. So the prize this month is again a Climate Reality t-shirt. So it even says Los Angeles chapter on it. So that's kind of cool. And in order to win the t-shirt tonight, we have it in all sizes necessary. You will have to answer a question. And here's the way this works. You will write your answer in the chat room, and the very first correct answer is the winner of the t-shirt. So get your fingers nimble and get ready. The question tonight about Robyn's interview is that when Robyn first got involved with the United States Green Building Council, it was a fairly new organization, and she had not located here yet. In what city was Robyn first involved with USGBC? Okay, I'm going to give it to Kip. He was right on it. So DC is actually not a city. Actually, DC is not a city. Can you follow up? DC is a district. So we need the name of the city. So now we have a conflict because now Lucy has answered it correctly.
Okay.
Kip, I think I'm going to have to go with Lucy on this just because Washington, DC is the correct answer that I was looking for. So Lucy is the winner of tonight's trivia challenge. So Lucy, you get a complimentary t-shirt. There's two ways you can get this. You can attend the next in-person meeting. Let me know you're coming and let me know what size you want and I'll bring it there. Or you can arrange to pick it up from me sometime. If you'd rather do that, whatever works. You can contact me directly, but we have a t-shirt with your name on it ready for you. Well, it doesn't really have your name on it, but I'll put a post-it on it with your name on it, so we'll know to say for you. So thank you guys for that. So I also want to put in the chat room a link to our survey. This is our very, very, very short, very, very quick survey to ask you, particular, if there's a better time when these meetings will make more sense for you. We're doing this. Our communications and marketing people are taking a look at that. So click on that big obnoxious long link that I just put in there. And you guys can, if you haven't filled out that survey, please don't go tonight before you do that. It's very, very brief, very short. You just basically say, here's the times I would be available. Obviously, this data from those of you attending tonight is skewed because we're asking people if they couldn't attend a Sunday night meeting, but you're still part of the conversation. So we want you to be part of the answer too. So I appreciate that. If you could please take that survey for us. So the other thing I'm going to put in the chat room right now is all those links at the beginning. There's 3 different links there. They each start with HTTPS kind of a thing. So the first 2 are regarding the wildlife ordinance. If you came to the meeting late and you're interested in weighing in on that, we would like comments saying that we support the wildlife ordinance, which is happening at city council level. And then the second one is the survey for the Sepulveda Basin Vision Plan, which again, we would urge you to say that you are in favor of all the wildlands enhancements that are being considered for the Sepulveda Basin Plan. So now we come to the time in our meeting. Does anyone have any announcements? They don't have to be chapter specific, but hopefully they're kind of climate specific. Or, you know, I guess if David's having a birthday party and he wants to invite everybody, that's cool too. Any particular announcements that anybody has? All right, no announcements. Anybody have any? I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. This is always a pleasure and a privilege for me to be involved in doing these with you guys. You guys are essential to what we do. And please, please never lose hope, because every little bit that we do matters. And, you know, it's important never to make the perfect the enemy of the good. We work on these things to make things better one step at a time. And I'm going to give you one last reminder. Our next chapter meeting is also a cleanup day. For those of you who arrived late, it will be on the website soon, but it is going to be a collaboration with Surfrider Los Angeles, where we are going to be meeting on Sunday, July 30th at 10 a.m. at the Venice Pier to do a beach cleanup with our friends at Surfrider LA. And then we will hang out at noon after that to do a chapter meeting, sitting on the sand and getting all grimy, and then possibly going and having lunch together for anybody who wants to hang out for that part. So if you, for physical reasons or just because you don't want to hang out and get in the sun that long or whatever, want to come to the chapter meeting, but you don't want to come to the cleanup part, that's still cool. That's fine. Just come at noon to that same location and you'll find us. If you have a Climate Reality t-shirt, wear it. So it'll be easier to see people of like mind. So hope I can see you guys on the 30th of July. And thanks so much for your time. Thanks for being part of tonight. And we'll see you around.
Bye.
Thank you.